they found his blood 3 days later. No body. No footprints. No signal. Everyone assumed he was already dead. But somewhere out in that frozen valley Euro, he was still crawling. This is not a legend. This is what it really costs to stay alive. Euro. He never planned to leave the trail. The route was simple, up along the ridge, a short loop through the trees, then back down before dark. He checked the weather, packed light, and told himself it was just another solo hike. Nothing dangerous. Nothing heroic. Just a day to clear his head. The warning signs were there, but small. Patches of old ice hiding under thin snow. Wind cutting sideways across the slope harder than the forecast had promised. That feeling in his stomach when the ground didn't quite match the map in his memory. He ignored all of it. He wasn't a beginner. He had been out here 100 times before. The fall didn't look dramatic in his memory. There was no cinematic slow motion, no echoing scream. One step landed on rock that shouldn't have moved. It shifted. His weight followed. Gravity took the rest. The world spun into a blur of white and dark trunks as he slid, bounced, and dropped through brush and stone. When he finally stopped, the silence hit harder than the impact. Pain came, a heartbeat later sharp in his ribs, burning in his side, distant and wrong in his left leg. The sky was just a narrow strip above black trees leaning at strange angles. His backpack was gone. His phone was gone. The trail was gone. He tried to breathe deep and his chest refused. He tried to move his leg and nothing answered. Somewhere far above, people walked along a safe, marked path. Down here, he understood a simple truth. No one had seen him fall. Euro. At first, he waited. It was the most human reaction he had left. Wait for the shock to fade. Wait for the body to reset. Wait for someone to notice he hadn't checked in. The forest around him felt suspended. The only sound was his own ragged breathing and the faint rush of wind through frozen branches. Minutes stretched. Nothing changed. Pain didn't fade. It sharpened. Cold slid in under his clothes with surgical focus, using sweat as a weapon. His fingers began to sting, then burn, then lose their edges. Each exhale rose in front of his face as a pale cloud and vanished like it had never existed. He tried to call out. The sound came out thin, swallowed after a few meters by snow and trees. No answer. No movement. No hint of another human anywhere. Waiting was not a plan. He rolled onto his side with a noise that didn't sound human. The broken leg dragged behind his body like dead weight. The angle was wrong, skin already swelling tight around bone that no longer lined up. Every small shift sent bright shocks of pain up his spine. He picked a direction not because he knew it was right, but because it was downhill. Down meant valleys. Valleys meant water. Water meant life, or at least a slower death. He dug his gloved fingers into the snow and started to crawl. The first meter felt impossible. The second didn't feel easier. But the distance between where he had fallen and where he was now was no longer zero. And that was the only victory the mountain allowed him that day. Euro. The day shortened faster than his progress. Shadows lengthened between the trees, folding the world into sharper contrasts of white and black. The light didn't fade gently, it dropped in visible increments, each degree of dimness tightening something inside his chest. He kept crawling anyway, dragging his ruined leg through snow that thickened around it like concrete. He lost track of how many times he stopped. Sometimes to gasp. Sometimes to swallow down nausea. Sometimes because the pain flared so bright it felt like his vision had been set on fire. He would lie still, cheek pressed to ice, heart pounding against cracked ribs, and bargain with himself. One more push. Just to that tree. Just to that rock. Just until the next patch of flatter ground. By the time the last light bled out of the sky, he had found a shallow dip in the slope where an old fallen trunk created a small break in the wind. It wasn't a Euro tea shelter. It was barely even cover. But it blocked the worst of the air from one direction, and that was enough to call it a camp. He knew what night meant out here. Temperatures would drop hard. The wind would search every gap in his clothing. The snow beneath him would pull heat from his body without mercy. His broken leg throbbed in deep, sickening waves that made him lightheaded. He had no fire. No tent. No way back. He scraped together branches and snow and packed them around his body as best he could, trying to trap any warmth that might escape. As darkness sealed the forest, the mountain stopped feeling like a place and started feeling like a verdict. He listened to his own shivering and tried not to imagine how a body felt when it finally stopped. The cold settled into him before sleep ever arrived. It moved slowly, deliberately, starting in his fingers and toes, then pushing inward toward joints and bone. His teeth chattered in violent, uncontrollable bursts that made his ribs scream in protest. Every breath stabbed. Every exhale felt thinner than the last. He tried to keep his mind working. Count breaths. Count seconds. Count anything. But the darkness pressed close, thick and absolute. The forest no longer felt wide. It felt tight. Enclosed. Like the walls of a narrowing corridor. Sound shifted with the windy Euro branches clicking, snow sliding from limbs, the distant crack of wood freezing and splitting. Every noise sounded closer than it was. At some point, he realized his shaking was slowing. Not because he was warming up. Because his body was running out of strength. Panic tried to surge through him again, but even panic needed energy. He forced his working hand against his chest and focused on breathing, short and shallow, stealing warmth back from each exhale as best he could. Pain dulled into something heavy and constant. Time fell apart. He drifted in and out of a shallow half-sleep where dreams and waking bled together. Faces appeared. Voices called. He answered one of them before realizing he had spoken out loud. When the first thin gray hint of morning crept through the trees, he was still breathing. That felt less like success and more like a delay. A Euro. Morning light brought truth with it. His lips were cracked and dark. His tongue felt swollen, useless. Swallowing hurt. When he tried to shift his body, the pain in his side exploded sharp and bright enough to steal sound from his throat. Blood had frozen stiff along his jacket and then thawed into sticky warmth beneath it. Dehydration made the world feel distant and unreal. He needed water. The thought grew louder than pain. He dismantled his makeshift shelter with shaking hands and started dragging himself downhill again. Every movement was slower now. Everything cost more. The forest floor felt uneven and endless beneath his palm. Then he heard it. Water. Not a roar. Not close. Just a faint, steady sound cutting through wind and breath. The sound pulled him forward in violent, stubborn bursts. He slid, rolled, crawled a Euro, anything that gained distance. By the time he reached the shallow stream, his arms trembled so badly he could barely lower his face to the surface. Cold water shocked through his system. He drank too fast. Too urgently. His stomach cramped in protest, but he didn't a Euro tea stop. He washed his hands, his mouth, his side. When he reached his leg, his fingers froze. The limb lay at a wrong angle, swollen purple and black in places. The skin was stretched tight as if it might split. He did not say the word a Euro broken. A Euro. He drank again and stared at the water until it stopped spinning. A Euro. The second night came faster than the first. clouds swallowed the last of the light and snow began to fall again in thin, miserable sheets. Without the effort of crawling to keep him warm, the cold returned with sharper teeth. He tried to gather branches for cover and failed after only a few weak pulls. His body shook itself apart. Hunger arrived quietly. Deep. Hollow. A pressure inside his stomach that felt less like pain and more like absence. He hadn't a euro tea eaten since before the fall. There was nothing left in him to burn but himself. Thoughts began to smear together. At times he was certain he heard footsteps near the stream. At other moments he believed someone was standing just behind the trees, watching him. He called out once in a hoarse whisper and hated himself for the desperation in the sound. By midnight, fever took hold. Heat poured through him in waves, followed by chills so violent his muscles locked. Reality softened at the edges. Images flickered through his mind that didn't a euro tea belong to the forced to euro rooms, voices, streets, a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He lay there shaking, soaked, starving, and broken, and the thought returned with terrifying clarity. It would be easier to stop. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just a euro stop. The forest would accept it without resistance. And for the first time since the fall, that idea felt reasonable. The thought did not leave him after it arrived. It stayed quiet at first. Patient. Waiting for the moments when his strength dipped too low to fight it properly. When his arms slipped on wet stone. When his breath came shallow and frantic. When the pain surged too fast for him to brace against. It would be easier to stop. The idea followed every movement. He fought it by shrinking the world again. Not the forest. Not the night. Not even the next hour. Only the next motion. Move the hand. Pull the body. Breathe. He dragged himself back to the stream near midday. The light had a different quality now, a euro thin, distant, stripped of warmth. In that pale reflection he saw what was happening to him. His ribs stood out sharply. His hands shook violently even while resting on rock. The skin along his leg had darkened to a sick, unnatural color. Infection was no longer a possibility. It was already there. The fever returned in hard waves. Heat flooded through him, followed by cold so violent it made him bite down on his own sleeve to keep from crying out. His thoughts stuttered. Words lost order. Memory slipped sideways. At one point he was convinced he was back on the trail. He tried to stand. His body folded instantly. The impact drove the air from his chest and he lay there gasping, face in slush, shaking with a strange, broken laughter that sounded nothing like relief. The forest did not respond. It only waited. A euro. The sound came without warning. Not loud. Not close. But wrong for a forest. A low mechanical hum slipped through the wind and water and breath like a thread pulled from another world. At first he thought the fever had finally broken his senses completely. He closed his eyes and waited for the sound to fade. It didn't a euro tea. It returned again in slow, steady pulses. Artificial. Rhythmic. Real. Hope did not arrive gently. It hit him like pain. The idea of a road sliced through the fog in his mind. The idea of movement that didn't a euro tea belong to trees or wind or water burned suddenly too bright to ignore. Weakness retreated under urgency so sharp it felt like renewed injury. Direction mattered again. He turned his body toward the sound and began to crawl, not toward comfort, but toward risk. Every pull tore skin from his palms. Stones cut into his forearms. His vision darkened at the edges. The sound vanished. He kept moving. It returned. Closer. Even when it disappeared again, he kept crawling toward where it had been, terrified that stopping would erase it forever. Night fell again while he was still moving. This time, darkness did not feel like a threat. It felt like an obstacle. €. The third night dissolved into motion and collapse. He moved until his arm failed completely. Then he lay shaking until it answered again enough for another pull. Short bursts of snow flattened leaves and erased his tracks almost as fast as he made them. The hum came and went. Always closer. Once, faint headlights cut through distant branches far uphill. He saw them for barely a second before the slope swallowed the light. The sight struck him so hard it froze his lungs. They hadn't seen him. The realization nearly ended him. He tried to scream. Only dry air tore out of his throat. By the time the lights vanished, his body shut down in stages. Fingers curled inward without command. Vision pulsed and tunneled. His heart hammered in shallow, desperate rhythm against damaged ribs. He made one last, uncontrolled reach. And nothing happened. The world shrank again to sound. Wind. Water. Breath. And beneath it €. The hum. Closer than ever. Dawn did not look like a sunrise. It looked like the forest slowly admitting that it hadn't finished him yet. The gray light revealed something new beneath his hand, gravel instead of dirt, crushed stone pressed into the mud in an unnatural pattern. The smell reached him before the meaning did. Oil. Rubber. Cold asphalt. For a moment, his brain refused to connect it. Then a vehicle passed somewhere just beyond his vision, the hiss of wet tires on road slicing through the morning air. The sound vibrated through the ground and into his bones. He was close. So close that one straight line of movement could have brought him visible. Except his body had nothing left. His arm trembled violently when he tried to drag himself forward. Muscles fired and failed. His fingers clawed uselessly at frozen gravel. His chest burned with shallow, broken breaths that never quite filled his lungs. Another vehicle approached. Desperation overrode logic. He gathered what little air remained, dragged it up through a throat rubbed raw by cold and screaming, and forced it out. It wasn't a word. It wasn't even a scream. It was just a sound that said one thing clearly. I am still here. The engineer's pitch changed. Brakes bit. The hum settled into a loud idle, close enough that he could feel it in the ground. For a terrifying second, nothing else happened. Then a door slammed. Footsteps ran toward him. €. The first thing he felt was heat. Not from the air, but from hands gloved, clumsy, but warm compared to the world he'd been trapped in. Fingers pressed against his neck, his wrist, his ribs. Voices burst into the quiet, overlapping, snapped into urgency. €s alive. €. €. Jesus, look at his leg. €. €. don't move him yet. €. Light stabbed into his eyes as someone leaned over him with a flashlight. He tried to focus on a face and saw only outlines, breath in the cold, a hat with some logo he couldn't read. Words tumbled out of his mouth without order. Apologies. Half-formed explanations. The names of people who were there. Someone squeezed his shoulder and told him to save his energy. They cut his jacket open. Cold bit briefly harder, then receded under layers of something heavier and warmer. A foil blanket rustled around him. Pressure clamped down on his side where blood still seeped. The pain roared up one last time, furious at being noticed, then began to slip away under the slow flood of something chemical through a needle in his arm. They lifted him onto a stretcher. The sky €. Wide, flat, colorless. He hadn't seen that much of it since the moment he fell. It looked wrong. Too open. Too far away. As they carried him toward the waiting ambulance, the forest slid past in blurred streaks. Trees that had towered over him now looked small. The ditch that had nearly become his grave was just another dark fold in the landscape. The ambulance doors closed. For the first time in days, the sound of the forest disappeared completely. €. He woke to a ceiling that did not move. Soft light. White tiles. The faint electronic beeping of machines that measured things his body no longer knew how to track on its own. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. The absence of cold felt impossible. He tried to move and pain answered immediately. Not the raw, tearing pain of the fall. A deep, controlled ache, wrapped in bandages and metal. His leg was heavy and distant under layers of plaster and hardware. Tubes ran from his arm to clear bags hanging beside the bed. A monitor traced his heartbeat in calm, indifferent spikes. A doctor appeared in the corner of his vision, then stepped closer. €. You ve been through a lot €, the man said. €. But you €, re here. Theta €s the important part. €. He didn't €t feel important. He felt like something barely rescued. They explained it in pieces over the next hours and days. Hypothermia. Severe dehydration. Multiple fractures in the leg. Internal bleeding that should have killed him long before anyone found him. Infection starting to take hold in the damaged tissue. He listened, but the words floated. What stayed with him was one sentence. Another 3 or 4 hours out there, and we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. It didn't feel like a dramatic line from a movie. It felt like a math problem with a narrow margin. He was alive not because he was strong, or smart, or prepared enough. He was alive because he kept moving just slightly longer than the mountain expected. And now he had to learn how to live with that. The days after the rescue blurred together into a rhythm he did not choose. Light. Needles. Sleep. Pain. Sometimes in that order. Sometimes all at once. His body existed now in sections. The leg was a problem to be solved by surgeons. The ribs were a slow equation of breath and time. The infection was a quiet threat measured in blood tests and hushed conversations at the foot of his bed. Nurses moved around him with calm efficiency, adjusting machines, changing dressings, waking him just as he began to sink into real rest. Visitors came in careful waves. Family first. Then a few close friends. They spoke softly, as if volume itself might break him. They told him how everyone thought he was already gone. How the search had been called off the night before he was found. How the man who stopped on the road almost hadn't how he been late for work and nearly kept driving. Each detail landed slowly. Too slowly. At night, when the room emptied and the machines took over the soundscape, the forest returned in fragments. He dreamed of fog without edges. Of falling without impact. Of crawling forever without reaching anything. He woke up with his hands shaking, gripping bedsheets as if they were wet leaves. The doctors called it a normal response. His body called it memory. €. Rehabilitation started before he felt ready to be human again. At first, it wasn't walking. It wasn't even standing. It was sitting upright without falling over. The attempt lasted 12 seconds. His vision narrowed. Sweat poured from him as if he were still out in the cold. Muscles trembled violently under the simple act of balance. The therapist held his shoulders and kept telling him to breathe as if breathing were something he might forget. When they finally lowered him back into the bed, he felt like he had been dragged across the mountain all over again. Standing came days later. The moment they put weight through his injured leg, pain surged like a live wire running through bone. His jaw locked so hard that his teeth clicked. He did not scream, but the soundless strain left blood at the corners of his mouth. They called that progress. Each day added something small. 5 seconds longer. One movement steadier. One collapse less violent. By the end of the second week, he could take 3 steps between the parallel bars. Each one felt like stepping into fire. €. Nights became the real battlefield. During the day, pain had structure. Schedules. Medication. Controlled effort. At night, it had freedom. Every time the ward dimmed and the noise thinned out, his body tensed as if waiting for impact. He flinched at doors closing down the hall. He woke up choking on breath that wasn't €t there. Sometimes he found himself sitting upright without remembering how he got that way. The dreams evolved. He no longer dreamed of falling. He dreamed of stopping. Dreamed of lying still in the snow, watching his own breath weaken, feeling the strange temptation of rest. In the dreams, no one ever stopped on the road. The hum passed by and faded. The forest took back what it had nearly lost. He woke from those dreams in panic, heart slamming, hands searching for the cast on his leg as proof that the ending had changed. Progress continued anyway. Weeks stacked on top of weeks. Strength returned unevenly, like a system rebooting with errors. Some days he could walk the length of the hallway with a crutch. Other days, he shook too hard to stand. The limp settled in early, stubborn and permanent. They told him he was doing well. He did not feel like someone who was doing well. He felt like someone who had learned exactly how close the edge really was. The day he left the hospital did not feel like a victory. There were no cheers. No sense of closure. Just a wheelchair, a stack of instructions, a bag of medication, and the unfamiliar weight of the outside world waiting behind sliding glass doors. Sunlight hit him hard. Not because it was bright but because it was uncontrolled. Wind brushed against his face and every muscle in his body tightened as if impact were coming again. The parking lot felt too open. Too exposed. The sky above him stretched without limits, and that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't fully explain. Home was different now. The hallway seemed narrower. The couch sat too low. The bathroom felt too far away. Every ordinary distance had become a calculation. Every movement required intent. His crutches rested against furniture like foreign tools. That first night at home, he did not sleep. He listened to the refrigerator hum. To pipes ticking. To the distant sound of traffic. Every mechanical noise pulled his mind back to the road. Every quiet moment pulled it back to the forest. He lay there stiff and awake until dawn, realizing that survival had not dropped him back into his old life. It had placed him beside it. PTSD did not announce itself with one clear moment. It arrived in fragments. A slammed door that made his heart spike. A sudden silence that made his hands shake. A crowded room that felt harder to breathe in than any mountain slope ever had. He learned quickly which places drained him. Grocery stores were too loud. Waiting rooms felt like trap time. Night driving made his jaw lock without warning. People told him to be patient with himself. He tried. But patience was hard when his own body kept betraying him. He woke up some nights convinced he had to move. Not overthink. Not hesitate. Just move. His legs screamed with every step down the hallway at 3 a.m, but he walked anyway until the urge passed. Until the forest faded from the walls. Until the room felt real again. Progress did not feel heroic. It felt repetitive. Uncelebrated. Exhausting. But it happened anyway. Months passed. The crutches disappeared first. Then the pain softened from sharp to steady. Then walking became less of a negotiation and more of a rhythm. The limp never left. It simply learned how to blend in. He returned to work slowly. Half days at first. Quiet tasks. Corners where he could sit when the pressure built in his chest. People tried not to stare. Tried not to ask too many questions. That kindness sometimes made it harder. They saw recovery. He still felt damage. What surprised him most was how memory worked. Some days, the forest felt distant like a story that belonged to someone else. Other days, the smell of wet leaves on the sidewalk could pull him straight back into the snow and the dark and the sound of his own breathing scraping against death. He learned to live with both versions of himself. The one who had fallen. And the one who had kept crawling. Both were real. Both were permanent. A year passed before he went back near the mountains. Not into them. Just near. He told himself it wasn't about bravery. It was about unfinished business that lived quietly under his skin. The kind you don't feel every day but when it stirs, it refuses to be ignored. The road that took him to the edge felt ordinary. Asphalt. Signs. Fences. Nothing about it hinted at what had happened beyond the tree line. Yet with every kilometer, his chest tightened in the same slow, familiar pattern. His leg throbbed with phantom warnings as if it remembered the slope before his mind reached it. He parked. Turned off the engine. Silence rushed in. Not the hostile silence of the forest night but the wide, open quiet of a place that did not care whether you came or left. He stepped out slowly, feeling the ground with more attention than he ever had before. Gravel shifted beneath his shoe. The sound was small. Harmless. His hands still shook. He walked only a few meters from the car. Enough to smell damp earth. Enough to hear wind fold through branches. Enough to feel the boundary between the life he had lived and the one that had almost ended him. He did not go farther. That day, standing still was enough. Fear changed shape after survival. Before the fall, fear had been loud. Sharp. Immediate. The kind you feel before a risky step or a bad decision. After the forest, fear became quieter and heavier. It moved in the background. It waited for silence. It waited for hesitation. Some days he barely noticed it. Other days it sat in his chest like a weight that changed the way he breathed. He learned that courage was no longer about ignoring fear. It was about carrying it without letting it decide everything. He began to walk more. At first on sidewalks. Then on dirt paths in city parks. Then along short, flat trails that never disappeared into shadows. Always with water. Always with a charged phone. Always with a clear exit. Each step rewrote something small inside him. Not erasing memory. Repositioning it. He no longer moved to prove anything. He moved because stopping had once tried to kill him. Perspective arrived quietly. Not in a single dramatic realization but in dozens of small moments that stacked on top of each other. Standing in line without frustration. Letting traffic pass without anger. Listening longer before speaking. Leaving places earlier than he used to without guilt. What once felt like weakness now felt like accuracy. He knew exactly how fragile a body was. He knew exactly how stubborn it could be. Problems did not vanish after survival. They simply changed scale. When something felt overwhelming, he measured it against the cold, the hunger, the hours he had spent dragging himself a few meters at a time through pain that had no promise of an ending. Most things did not survive that comparison. Life did not become easier. But it became clearer. And clarity, he learned, could be just as powerful as strength. He never became the kind of person who talked about what happened easily. People expected that. They expected speeches, lessons, inspiration wrapped in neat sentences. They expected him to explain exactly what it felt like to be that close to disappearing. But some experiences refuse translation. How do you explain the moment when pain becomes the background of existence? How do you describe the moment when stopping feels logical? How do you put into words the second when a sound in the distance means the difference between extinction and continuation? So he didn't try. Instead, he showed it quietly in the way he lived. He left places earlier. He drank water before he felt thirsty. He rested without guilt. He listened more than he spoke. People called it caution. He called it remembering. The mountain never called him back. Not in dreams. Not in temptation. Not in unfinished longing. It simply remained where it had always been. Indifferent. And that mattered. Because for a long time, he thought survival meant that the place would haunt him forever. That every tree would feel like an accusation. That every slope would feel like a challenge waiting to finish what it had started. Instead, what haunted him were not the rocks or the cold. It was the version of himself that almost chose to stop. That was the ghost he learned to live beside. Not with fear. With awareness. Years later, most people who met him had no idea. They saw a man with a slight limp. A man who chose calm over chaos. A man who declined some invitations and left others early without explanation. They did not see the forest when they looked at him. They saw only the surface of a life that continued. And that was enough. Because survival is not something you wear. It is something threaded quietly through every decision you make after the moment you realize how easily all of it can disappear. The place where it almost ended never became sacred. There is no marker. No sign. No story carved into stone. Just trees. Wind. And the quiet that never explains itself. Sometimes, when life slows enough for memory to catch up, he still feels the weight of cold settling into his bones, the pull of exhaustion that once tried to convince him that stopping was reasonable. But now that feeling no longer terrifies him. It reminds him. It reminds him that survival was not a single act. Not the fall. Not the crawl. Not the rescue. Survival became the decision he makes every ordinary day that follows. The decision to move when it would be easier to stay. To speak when silence feels safer. To live fully in a body that once nearly failed him. No one looking at him now would guess how close he came to vanishing. And that is exactly how he wants it. Because survival is not proof meant for the world. It is a quiet contract between a person and the moment they almost didn't return from. And if there is any meaning left in what happened to him, it is this. He did not survive to become a warning. He survived to become time itself. Time he once nearly lost.